Okay. Okay. Good afternoon to everyone. Good afternoon to everyone. So today we will discuss about the contract research organizations and its responsibilities. So what is its role in the what is the role of CRO in the clinical research? So at first, so organizations is the services so which are provided the support for the pharmaceutical industry. So along with that, so whatever it is essential for conducting the clinical trials, so for the presenting boom and various complications when they are involved in the drug discovery and clinical research process. So for example, certain companies like Lupin and Quintly Cipla, so these are the companies so which will act as a CROs for the many of the companies which they are going to do for the work in the clinical research process. So they will act as the CROs. So they are also conducted type of the trials. So which with the collaboration with many of the multinational companies like MNCs. So with the Indian companies, so to make the space for the foreigners. So whenever if you are going for the strategies for the CROs, so it is falling into three categories. So the one is tactical outsourcing and also maximal outsourcing and also strategic outsourcing. So in the tactical outsourcing, when it is called as, so whenever individual studies or activities involved in the study, so CROs only, so they will see for the in-house resources which are available in their own companies and became inadequate because unforeseen study of reduction in the staff because they are having the certain facilities in in-house resources, so that they are reducing the manpower. So depending on that, work type which you are going to do. So the second thing is maximum outsourcing. So with this strategy of the CRO, for example, if you are going to conduct a clinical trial on certain things, so if you need any kind of MRI scans with the certain point of Tesla, so if it is not available in your in-house hospital, so what usually you will do is you will go with the any scanning center nearby, so with the outsourcing basis. So in that, in the maximum whatever the requirement of the MRI, so the MRI machine is not available in your institute or in your organization. So at that time, as a outsourcing base, so you will use maximum scans will be get from those companies. So in that, the third one is strategic outsourcing. So the sponsor conduct the phase one and also for the phase two studies and hires the CRO to conduct the larger routine studies. So in case of three successful steps, so with the success of this CRO, so usually, so to successful outsourcing, so what usually it is saying is, so the sponsor should focus on the mainly three critical steps, which are very important with the CRO. We ensure with the proper CRO only he get the proper success. So for that, these are the three critical steps which you need to follow is, so determine the accurate study specifications and that select the right CRO. Along with that, you need to how you are going to manage the study. So along with that, so what are the exact sponsors roles and responsibilities in your studies? So it will define the study specifications, provide the information. Along with that, so CRO, so in that, what are the results, whatever you got that has to be monitored. So you need to recognize the red flags as warning information. So whenever if there kind of any kind of errors has happened from the CRO side or the sponsor side, that has to be discussed early in the early stage itself and resolve problems. Is there any kind of problems that has to be resolved at the earlier stage itself? After that, if there is any change in the scope while you are doing in the process, so is there any necessity to change any kind of scope for the clinical research, that has to be approved and discussed with the CRO along with the sponsor. So if the CRO want to do a detailed study, the specifications and the CRO experience in the internal target in the therapeutic area, so it will be possible for the CRO. So it is compared to the fast experience with the sponsor's projection. Okay. So if the sponsor has provided the detailed specification for the CRO, which is having very experience in that particular region, in that particular therapeutic area, that will be possibilities for CRO to compare past experience with the sponsor's projection. For example, if you are doing in the work in the neurology, if the CRO has done the previous projects in the neurology department, so he is having certain experience with the dealing of the cases in the neurology. So that will give the more experience that particular CRO. Provide the more specifications. Is there any kind of problems arrival during that neurology? So because of his experience in the neurology, which he worked for the past several years, so that will be helpful for the sponsors project. Is the work experience in that particular area. So here we see the CRO roles and responsibilities. So we need to see the evaluate of the feasibility and then provide adequate and well managed staff. So though the CRO is very good and fine, if we don't provide the proper facilities along the clinical research, so that will be the complications for them. So whenever if you want to see any kind of success in the research, so each and every member of the research staff has to be involved, so then only you will get the success. So it's the same thing if you are conducting the activities and managing process. So whenever if there any kind of problems has been arise, or else any kind of proposed solutions to the sponsor actions has to be bring to his notice, because some of the people research at the initial stages they think the minor problem. So what is the need of discussing with CRO, or else what is the need of discussing with the sponsor? So it should not be like that. Many of them may think that so it's a very minor problem. So it should not be like that. Whatever it may be minor or moderate or severe problem. So that has to be brought into notice of the sponsor. So that will be the good thing. So the sponsor will think that so they are saying each and every aspect of the research what they are doing to us. So that will give the research team will gain the more confidence of the sponsor, because these people can be reliable because they are saying each and everything. Identify adverse reaction. So if that we have farm function and monitoring. So in that, whatever the solution you are going to say that particular problem, so that is very cost minimal, cost effective. That means that has to be bared by the company as well as the patient. So that is the important aspect. High. So sometimes it's quite difficult for the patient or the sponsor to bear the another cost from the budget. So CRO roles and responsibilities in that. So here already we have done that specification. So very briefly see. So whenever if the sponsor has to give the roles to the CRO, so what kind of responsibilities he has taken? So he has to give the clear-cut information of the study specifications to the CRO. Proper information has to be provided to the CRO. He has to monitor the results. So recognize the red flag. Is there any kind of warnings or errors has been occurred while doing the process? And then resolve the problems and also approve the change in the scope. Next thing related to achieve quality, ensuring timelines and managing costs. So whenever they are going to give the demonstration about particular things, so we need to see the, for the namesake, they should not say that so within the 3 months the work will be over. It should not be like that. So for that we need to prepare a timeline. So the timeline we need to prepare. So on which month what work they are going to do. So like that, what is the achievement of that particular month? So what is the specific target for this month? So how much you have been achieved in the research for this month? So that timeline and the cost. So if the month cost has been, if they have been given to for a 30,000 rupees for the particular thing. So if the cost is above 30,000, so is happened, that has to be informed. If it is less than 30,000, so why the budget has been also whatever the allocated has been very less than the allocated budget. So that has to be give proper explanation to the CRO with the sponsor that has to be discussed. So the performance of the metric should be negotiated between the sponsor and CRO at the prior of the study. Is there any kind of things has been observed? So while they are demonstrating, if the CRO has been meet the criteria of the objective, so the sponsors and CRO has the shared responsibility to examine the process of agree on appropriate solution. For example, if anything is happened, so this will happen sometimes. What is the thing is the sponsor simply should not escape from the work. So simply saying that I have been allocated all the work. You're given the responsibilities. I have allocated the budget for you. So, but it is your responsibility. I don't want to involve anything. So I just want the output. I need the proper quality thing. So like that, he should not be like a one-sided. So if anything is that it has to be discussed. If any problems arises from the CRO, if he is failing to meet the whatever the research objectives, so if he is failing to reach that criteria, so that has to be discussed with the sponsor. The sponsor has to be shared his knowledge how to overcome this kind of problems for the CRO. So the most interactions between the CRO and the sponsor so will take place between the individual team members and their technical counterparts. Sometimes so they need to discuss the sponsor. So while discussing with the CRO along with his research team, so he has to discuss all the points. Then only whenever is there kind while discussing, so there may be more chances of any kind of questions may arise. So for then itself, we can find the solutions for there while we are doing the discussion. So for that, the technical staff should focus on the information exchange and also issue identification. So while they are doing the discussions itself, discussion process, so they need to identify the exact what kind of issues may happen. So that has to be identified. So how to overcome that one. So that the information has to be exchanged in the discussions with the sponsor and CROs. So the sponsor and CRO should hold a kickoff meeting prior to the initiation of the study. For example, after giving particular work, so he straight away should not say that, so I am going to no need of discussion anything right now. So you start the work, later we will discuss. So it should not be like that. So to meet his goals for the criteria, so whatever it has been given handover to the CRO, so what is his exact role, what he is expecting from the research. So in that output, what he is expecting from the outsourcing base or straightaway MNC base. So in that has to be discussed priorly before starting the study with the sponsor. So in that, the goals of meeting or whenever they are going to conduct the meeting. So the agenda be to promote the ownership of the study among the team members. So to clarify the roles and responsibilities of sponsor and CRO. So what are the exact roles? So they have to perform in the research itself. So to identify the primary sponsors and CRO contracts, so to present agreed performance metrics and also audit process. So whenever is there any kind of audits, so from sponsorship side, so what kind of things he is going to perform. So from CRO side, what he has to be given. So to define the approach for the problem resolution. So is there any kind of problem has been arise? So that has to be discussed and it has to be resolved in the meeting itself. So to define those changes that can be agreed upon informally, so those required a formal change order. So whatever that has been discussed in the meetings, so that has to be documented and then that has to be shared with the two things. So identifying and resolving the problems. So whenever if there any kind of identified at the early stage, so I told earlier, so the most important thing whenever they are going to the research, so from the CRO side, so is there any kind of at the early stage mistakes or any kind of errors has been happened, so that will minimum the impact of the study cost, timing and other quality. Otherwise, if they didn't identify at the earlier stage itself, it is at the final stage or else before the final stage. So that will be the more time waste process. Along with that, the quality may has to be compromised because of the timeline and also the cost and time and each and everything has been wasted. So for that reason, it is important to for each and every team member to inform the project manager any issue before attempting to resolve it. So if they have been identifying any kind of problems at the early stage itself, so that has to be informed to his project manager or that CRO. So that has to be resolved. Straight away, the team member should take the initiation, but need to discuss about with that particular project manager, because if he has been resolved, that is well and good. If anything is happened, so from the project manager side, he may ask that, so why you have taken your own decision without discussing? So that kind of things will sometimes, if anything goes wrong, so the team member has to be blamed. Sometimes that will be lack of volunteerness in the involvement in the projects. So for that reason, you should not straight away take the decision. So the team member has to be discussed with the project managers. So this information will enable to the project manager to determine so whether the problem is an isolated case or is a part of a larger problem that needs to be addressed with the corresponding project manager. So for example, if the problem we have been identified, so it is when separately has been done, it has to be isolated or not, or else it is whether it is a larger problem, so which has to be discuss straight away with the project manager. So the next thing is red flags. So the red flags in the early warning may not require immediate action, but should be evaluated to determine the significant underlying problem exists. So at the early stage, if there kind of any kind of problems has been raised, so that has to be whatever, because of that, what are the consequences? So because of that early stage problems, what consequences may we see? So that has to be discussed. So the each team member may wish to prepare a list of red flags for his or own individual technical area. So the typical red flags and possible significant underlying problems are, so the selection of inexperienced investigators by the CRO. So the CRO monitoring staff may be inexperienced. For example, so this is what I told. So whenever if you are going for the selection of the CRO, he must be the right person which is having the previous experience in that particular area, or else whatever the staff he is going to recruit, if they are inexperienced in that particular thing, he has to be guided in a proper way. Straight away, so you are involved in this project, so do your work. So it should not be like that. So the CRO will involve like a team member as a leader. So he has to be support each and every member. So those who doesn't know how to solve the problem, how to identify the problem. So you need to involve and he need to make sure that he need to trust. He has to he need to get the confidence from each and every member of that particular team. That is, so if anything is going wrong, so straight away we can discuss with the CRO. That confidence and trust has to be provided by the CRO to the that particular team member. So questions from the study site directed to the sponsors. So the CRO may not be provided adequate training to the site personnel. So whenever if they are doing for the particular work, so that if the CRO didn't train them properly, so that will be affect on the output of that work, quality of that work. So the inadequate monitoring reports from the CRO, so the staff may not receiving the adequate training and supervision. So this is what the important thing. Whenever if they want to work on that particular mission, for example, if the staff is working on for example, MRI scan mission. So if the technical staff need to know how to operate that things, so how to hold the things, so how it is going to work, how much duration it is going to take, and then so each and everything. So is there any kind of various types of MRI scans is there in the brain itself? So what are those kind of scans? So that technical information has to be told to the technical team, and then he has to discuss to give the detailed information, and then you need to give the proper training and you need to supervise them. So then only they will get the whatever that they are expecting the outcome. So that will be the good thing for them. So the next thing is, so the protocol should be incorporated by the reference into the context. So the protocol must not be deviated from. So we discussed about the clinical protocol in the earlier classes. So it should not be deviated. So except as agreed in writing between the parties and approved by the ethics committee. And then in the opinion of the investigator, it is necessary to do so immediately in order to protect the health and safety of the research project. So in those cases, so the protocol must be deviated, but that has to be informed to the ethical committee in later also. So whenever they are having the review meeting, so at that time you must discuss with the research committee that, so sir, whenever we are going involving in this project, so these are the 2 points has been deviated, or else these are the 3 points which have been slightly deviated from the work. So because of this particular reason, so you need to give the proper explanation with the documentation from to the IRB. So the key person should be considered. So this might be specified that identify individuals or a certain number of staff specified by the minimal qualifications. So we'll work on the study. So at that time, so if there any kind of details has been changed, so that information has to be provided. So what are the minimum qualifications exactly required to work on that particular study? So the contract should address whether the CRO or investigator is allowed to give the subcontract of any obligations. So if so which of them? So sometimes what will happen is, so whenever if the CRO, for example, one company has got the sponsorship from that particular company, so what they will do is, so that some of the works they will give to the subcontracts. That means very minimal part to the some upcoming companies or many other companies, so which has been very good at that particular work. So it will, that information has to be passed on to the sponsor. So before giving to that information, because our company, in our company rules, so that CRO has to be clearly state to the sponsor that, so if do any kind of some particular things, so we'll go for the subcontract to some particular things. So that details has to be given, and then that has to be accepted by the sponsor. So the next thing, so as specified party, so must hold or obtain the all the necessary authorizations. So all the legal requirements and including labeling should be compliant. So is there any kind of compliance? So it need to be discussed and follow the ICH and GCP guidelines, or equivalent should be required. So whenever if the investigator must obtain the ethical committee approval in the relevant work, so the study refers to the all amendments. So whenever if there is any amendments is needed in your protocol or in your work, so that has to be the investigator again informed to the ethical committee, and then that has to be get approval from them. Relevant changes is needed for that amendments. So that the study must be carried out to the highest professional standards. So timing. So whenever you need to going to start that, so you need to give the starting date and the duration of the, and also along with that end date should be identified. For example, so for from which date to which date you are going to do, so how much duration is required. So you need to give an assume timeline. So if there is sometimes if the project may, you may thought that if the project may need another more time, for that you need to add plus or minus 3 months or 6 months if it is required. So the number of subjects recruited by the specific date should be addressed. The options if the recruitment rate is not on the target. So the provisions making the status of the reports, so which has to be providing, so that interim analysis has to be done and the submitting the final report. So the specified date should be made. So in that you need to tell that, so from you have been given the timeline, for example, for a 3 years. So in that 3 years, so if the work is completed, so you need to give the approximate date that by this date we are going to complete, or else if it is taking more than 3 years, so you need to give what is the extra time you needed. So maybe at exact what date you are going to submit all these kind of documents that has to be given. So after that data, so except for the purpose of the study, it is required by the law. So all the data must be kept confidential. And then retention of the title specified parties. So it should be all the documents and materials should be spelled out. The protection of the IPR of the sponsors must be covered. So if you are providing any kind of this intellectual property rights, so all the things has to be given. So the data must be maintained, all the records should be maintained. So for the study, including all the case reported from, if you are identifying any kind of ADR, degree interactions, is there any kind of unusual occurrences has been happened, so that has to be recorded, and also is there any kind of legislations is needed, so that has to be described. The next thing, so the contract should specify that, so the cost and amounts of that particular timing, so advanced stage and intern and final stage, so how you are going to pay, so all the payments for the reasonable expenses, so you need to mention. So whether the separate accounts has to be established, or else from the single account you are going to give on your budget. So for every amendment, so after doing the amendments, is there any kind of changes in the budget? So that budget has to be budget changes also you need to be give the information. So is there any early termination of any kind of workers? So that has to be intimated. So along with that, the materials, the supplier of the investigated vouchers, updates, and also products. So all that should be documented by the sponsor. So the next thing is in relations to the liability, all the things should cover and appropriate specific grounds. So that on the specific grounds, it is sensible to provide the termination by the sponsor to on the notice without a reason. So is there any obligations for the work at that point of time? So he has all the rights to terminate that particular work. So the termination on the insolvency of administration, so it should be due to the on the long-term suspension or for the as per the agreement. So you can has all the right to take this kind of things. So in the termination process, you need to do the strategic approach for the outsourcing. So you need to follow all the 3 principles which you have been discussed earlier. So that is accurate study specifications, select the right CRO, along with that how to manage the study. So in that we need to select the CRO according to his all 3 C's, that is capability, compatibility, and the cost. we need to evaluate the CRO's resources allocation and then their performance metrics from the earlier. So what are the projects they have been handled, and ensure that efficient communication with the CRO. So this is about the responsibilities of CRO. Thank you. Is there any doubts for anyone?